Oh, y'all, food is pain. I don't want you to think that everything up to this point was about fornication, free booze, and ready access to drugs. I sure recall for you the delights of Portuguese squid stew, of wild fleet oysters on the half shell, of New England clam chowder, of greasy, wonderful, fire-red chorizo sausages, kale soup, and a night when the stripped bass jumped right out of the water and onto Cape Cod's dinner tables. There was in 1974 no culinary culture that I was aware of. In P-Town in particular, there were not, as there are today, any star chefs, school-trained, name-on-the-jacket characters whose names and utterances were tossed around by foodies, their photos swapped like baseball cards. There were no catchphrases like "bam" and "let's kick it up a notch" bandied about on television for a credulous public like there are today. These were early times in American food. Squid was considered a garbage fish, practically given away at the docks. Tuna was sold mainly as cat food or to canneries and to a few enterprising Japanese who were thought to confuse things with the high prices they paid. Monkfish was yet to be called latte, L-O-T-T-E, and make its appearance on Manhattan dinner tables. Most fish in P-Town was slapped boneless and skinless onto sizzle platters, drizzled with clarified butter and paprika, and then broiled to death. The parsley sprig and the lemon wedge were state-of-the-art garnishes. Our few culinary heroes at the Dreadnought were admired more for their studliness on the line, meaning number of dinners served each night, amount of pain and heat endured, total number of waitresses screwed, cocktails consumed without visible effect. These were stats we understood and appreciated. There was Jimmy Lester, the broiler king, whom we thought a lot of. He'd worked for years at a nearby steakhouse and was famous for the remarkable number of steaks and chops he could handle at one time on his big rollout broiler. Jimmy had moves, meaning he spun and twirled and stabbed at meat with considerable style and grace. For a 220-pound man, he was credited with coming up with the bump, a bit of business where a broiler man with both hands full of sizzle platters or plates knocks the grill back under the flames with his hip. We liked that. The mishandling of food and equipment with panache was always admired. To some extent, this remains true to this day. Butchers still slap down prime cuts with just a little more force and noise than necessary. Line cooks can't help putting a little English on outgoing plates, spinning them into the pass-through with reverse motion so they curl back just short of the edge. Oven doors in most kitchens have to be constantly tightened because of the repeatedly being kicked closed by clogged shod feet. And all of us dearly loved to play with knives, and the boys across the street were considered to be a championship team, the perfect example of culinary ideals of the time. Mario's restaurant was a hugely successful Southern Italian joint, and the Mario crew were feared and respected because they did more covers by a few hundred each night than almost anyone in town. It was fairly sophisticated stuff for the time. Whole eggs of veal were actually butchered on the premises. Stocks were made from real bones, not commercial base. Sauces were made from scratch with quality ingredients, and the Mario crew were the loudest, crudest, most badass bunch of cookies in town. When they'd swing by the Dreadnought for a few pops after work, they made our ragtag bunch of part-time roofers feel small. They were richer, more confident mood, with even more swagger and style than our motley crew of oddballs and amateurs. They moved in a pack with their own dialect, a high-pitched, ultra-femme affected drawl, salted with terms from 18th century English literature and Marine Corps drill instructor, speak a lush, intimidating, sardonic secret language which was much imitated. You, sir, are a loathsome swine, too damn ignorant to pour piss from a boot. Your odor offends me, and my shell-like ear gapeth to hear thy screams of pain. I insist you avert your face and serve me a libation before I smite your sorry ass with the tip of my boot, you sniveling little cocksucker. And they had women's names for each other, a jarring thing to hear, as they were all huge, ugly-looking, and wild-eyed, with muscles and scars and door-knocker-sized earrings. They looked down on the outsiders, frequently communicating with only a glance or a smile, and moved through the streets and bars and back alleys of P-Town like titans. They had more coke, better weed, bigger gold, prettier women. They loved rubbing our noses in it. How many, they asked after a busy Saturday night. Oh, 150, 200, Bobby would reply, fluffing the number a little, fluffing it up a little, the number. We did. What? How many was it, Dee Dee, darling? The Mario chef would ask casually. 450? 5? 6, I think, Dimitri, the Mario pasta man. 6, I think, Dimitri, the Mario pasta man. Oh, the Mario, because Mario. a restaurant called Mario. 6, I think, Dimitri the Mario Pasta Man would reply, a man who would later play a major part in my career. Yes, 6. Slow night, I dare say. Pathetic, don't you know? Pig dogs must have eaten their mung elsewhere tonight. Dairy Queen, probably. And then there was a Howard Mitchum. Howard was the sole named chef in town. 50-ish, furiously alcoholic and stone deaf, the result of a childhood accident with fireworks. Howard could be seen most nights after work holding up the fishermen's bars or lurching about town shouting incomprehensibly. He liked to sing as well. Though drunk most of the time and difficult to understand, Howard was a revealed elder statesman of Cape Cod cookery, a respected chef of a very busy restaurant, the author of 2 very highly regarded cookbooks, the Provincetown Seafood Cookbook and Creole, Gumbo, and all that jazz. 2 volumes I still refer to and which were hugely influential for me and my budding culinary peers of the time. He had wild, unruly white hair, a gin blossom face, a buzzard's gut, and he wore the short-sleeved, snap-button shirt of a dishwasher. Totally without pretension, both he and his books were fascinating depositories of recipes, recollections, history, folklore, and illustrations, drawing on this abiding love for humble, working-class ethnic food of the area. Howard loved seafood, all seafood. Unlike most of us, he knew what to do with it. He loved the less popular fishes of the day, using tuna, squid, mackerel, bluefish, and salt cod to great advantage. His signature dish was haddock amandine. I'm probably killing that. And people would drive for hours from Boston to sample it. He was the first chef I knew to appreciate fully the local Portuguese cuisine. The spicy cumin-scented squid stews, the linguiqua-laden kale soups, the coupling of fish and pork sausages, and he was a strident advocate for the mystical powers of the quahog, the humble, slightly tough local clam. Once each summer, Howard and friends, mostly artists, local fishermen, writers, and drunks, would throw a party called the John J. Gatsby Memorial Clam Bake in honor of a departed fisherman friend. It was a major social event for Pete Town's year-round residents, and for those of us who worked the season in the restaurant business, Howard and friends would dig pits in the beach and drop shiny new trash cans into the holes, then fill them with quahogs, lobsters, codfish, vegetables, potatoes, and corn, allowing them to simmer over glowing coals buried deep in the sand while everyone drank themselves silly. To us at the Dreadnought, Howard was a juju man, an oracle who spoke in tongues. We might not have understood Howard, but we understood his books, and while it was hard to reconcile his public behavior with the wry, musical, and lovingly informative tone of his writings, we knew enough to respect the man for what he knew and for what he could do. We saw someone who loved food, not just the life of the cook. We saw someone who loved food, not just the life of the cook. Howard showed us how to cook for ourselves, for the pure pleasure of eating, not just for the tourist hordes, H-O-R-D-E-S. Howard showed us that there was hope for us as cooks, that food could be a calling, that the stuff itself was something we could actually be proud of, a reason to live, and that stuck with some of us from those early frontier days. He influenced a lot of my friends. I read a Molly O'Neill column in the New York Times magazine recently in which she was describing the delights of Portuguese-influenced Cape Cod food like white beans, kale, and chorizo. White bean. I knew she'd eaten the old man's food and probably read his books too. Without his name being mentioned, Howard's reach had extended across decades to my Sunday paper, and I was glad of it. There was another inspiring moment, a rough, choppy, moonlit night on the water, and the Dreadnought's manager looked out the window suddenly to spy thousands of tiny bait fish breaking the surface, rushing frantically towards shore. He knew what that meant, as did everyone else in town with a boat, a gaff, and a loaf of Wonder Bread to use as bait. The strippers were running. Thousands of the highly prized, relatively expensive striped bass were in a rare feeding frenzy. Suddenly, therefore, the taking, you had literally only to throw bread on the water, bash the tasty fish on the head with a gaff, and then haul them in. They were taking them by the hundreds of pounds. Every restaurant in town was loading up on them. Their parking lots like ours, suddenly a Coleman-lit staging area for scaling, gutting, and wrapping operations. The Dreadnought lot, like every other lot in town, was suddenly filled with gore-covered cooks and dishwashers laboring under flickering gas lamps and naked bulbs to clean, wrap, and freeze the valuable white meat. We worked for hours without knives, our hair sparkling with snowflake-like fish scales, scraping, tearing, filleting, At the end of the night's work, I took home a 35-pound monster, still twisted with rigor. My roommates were smoking weed when I got back to our little place on the beach, and as often happens on such occasions, we're hungry. We had only the bass, some butter, and a lemon to work with, but we cooked that sucker up under the tiny home broiler and served it on an aluminum foil, tearing at it with our fingers. There was a bright moonlit sky now. A mean high tide was lapping at the edges of our house, and as the windows began to shake in their frames, a smell of white spindrift and salt saturated the air as we ate. It was the freshest piece of fish I'd ever eaten. I don't know if it was due to the dramatic quality the weather was beginning to take on, but it hit me right in the brain pan, a meal that made me feel better about things, made me better for eating it, somehow even smarter. Somehow it was a protein rush to the cortex, a clean 3-ingredient high, eaten with hands. Could anything be better than that? As the season came to an end, the regular crew began to fade away. Off to work ski resorts in Colorado, charter boats in the Caribbean, restaurants and crab shacks in Key West. After Labor Day, I got my chance to move up for the last few weeks before the Dreadnought closed for the year. I worked the fry station, dunking breaded clams and shrimp into hot oil for a while, racked up a serious body count of lobsters on the double-decker steamer, and finally was moved up again to do a few shifts on the mighty broiler. I cannot describe to you the sheer pleasure, the power of commanding that monstrous, fire-breathing iron and steel furnace, bumping the grill under the flames with my hip the way I'd seen Bobby and Jimmy do it. It was tremendous. I couldn't have felt happier, more powerful, in the cockpit of an F-16. I ruled the world for a few short weeks, and I was determined to make that station my own the following season. Sadly, things didn't turn out as planned. The next summer, Mario bought our faltering restaurant. Mario was kind enough to allow those of us who worked there the previous year to audition for our old jobs with a few shifts in his kitchen. I was thrilled by the opportunity and headed up to P-Town that April, filled with hope and confidence, certain I'd make the cut, land that top-tier broiler job, the big money, the gig that would surely make me one of the pirate elite, an ass-kicking, throat-slitting stud who could lord it over the salad man and fry cooks and prep drones at less successful restaurants. I don't know, he's just being arrogant. I pulled into town. I remember wearing, God help me, a spanking new light blue Pierre Cardin seersucker suit. The shoes, too, were blue. Here I was hitchhiking into a town that, for all intents and purposes, was a downscale, informal Portuguese fishing village, an artist's colony, a town where people dress unpretentiously in work clothes, denims, army surplus, old khakis, and in some deranged early 70s bout of disco-inspired hubris. I chose to make my entrance in Gull, G-U-L-L, -wing. W-I-N-G, shouldered Robert Palmer wear, just itching to show the local yokels how we did it in New York City. They were pounding veal in the kitchen when I arrived, the whole crew on every available horizontal surface, banging on veal cutlets for scallopine with heavy steel mallets. The testosterone level was high, very high. These guys were the A-team, and they knew it. Everybody knew it. The floor staff, the managers, even Mario seemed to walk on eggs around them, as if one of them would suddenly lunge through the bars of their cage and take a jagged bite. I alone was too stupid to see how over my head I was among these magnificent cooking machines. I'd served a few hundred meals at a relaxed pace in a not very busy joint in the off-season. These guys drilled out 400, 500, 600 fast-paced, high-end meals a night. It was Friday, an hour before service, when I was introduced to Tyrone, the broiler man, who I'd be trailing. Looking back, I can't remember Tyrone as being anything less than 8 feet tall, 400 pounds of carved obsidian with the shaved head, a prominent silver-capped front tooth, and the ubiquitous fist-sized closed hoop earring, or ubiquitous fist-sized gold hoop earring. While his true dimensions were probably considerably more modest, you get the picture. He was big, black, hugely muscled. His size 56 chef's coat stretched across his back like a drumhead. He was a Gargantua, a black Viking, Conan the Barbarian, John Wayne, and the Golem all rolled into one. But unintimidated as only the ignorant can be, I started shooting my stupid mouth off right away, regaling my new chums with highly exaggerated versions of my adventures at the old Dreadnought. What bad boys we had been. I blathered on about New York, trying to portray myself as some street-smart, experienced, even lightly dangerous professional gun for hire of the cooking biz. They were, to be charitable to myself, not impressed. Not that this deterred me in the slightest from yapping on and on. I ignored all the signs, all of them, the rolling eyes, the tight smiles. I plunged on, oblivious to what was happening in the kitchen right around me, the monstrous amounts of food being loaded in the lowboys and reach-ins for missing place. I missed the determined sharpening of knives, the careful arranging and folding of side towels in kitty-cornered stacks, the stockpiling of favorite pans, ice, extra pots of boiling water, backup supplies of everything. They were like Marines digging in for the siege at Kherson, and I registered nothing. I should have seen this well-practiced ritual for what it was, understood the level of performance here in Mario Land, appreciated the experience, the time served together that allowed these hulking giants to dance wordlessly around each other in the cramped, heavily manned space behind the line without ever colliding or wasting a movement. They turned from cutting board to stove up with breathtaking economy of movement. They hefted 300-pound stock pots onto ranges, tossed legs of veal around like pullets, blanched hundreds of pounds of pasta, all the while indulgently enduring without comment my endless self-aggrandizing line of witless chatter. I should have understood this femme convict patois, this business with the women's names, the arcane expressions, seen it for what it was, the end result of years working together in a confined space under extreme pressure. I should have understood, but I didn't. An hour later, the board was filled with more dinner orders than I'd ever seen in my life. Ticket after ticket kept coming in, one on top of the other, waiters screaming, tables of 10, table of 6, 4 tops, more and more of them coming, no ebb and flow, just a relentless, incoming, nerve-shattering gang rush of orders. And the orders were all in Italian. I couldn't even understand most of the dupes, or these waiters were screaming at me, or what these waiters were screaming at me. The seasoned Mario cooks had an equally impenetrable collection of code names for each dish, making it even more difficult to make sense of it all. There were cries of ordering and pick up every few seconds, and fire, more food going out, more orders coming in, the squawk of an intercom as an upstairs bartender called down for food. Flames 3 feet high leaped out of pans. The broiler was crammed with a slowly moving train of steaks, veal chops, fish fillets, lobsters. Pasta was blanched and shocked and transferred in huge batches into steaming colanders, falling everywhere, the floor soon ankle-deep in spaghetti alla citara, linguine, garganelli, tazzarini, fusilli. The heat was horrific, sweat flowed into my eyes, blinding me as I spun in place. I shrugged and sweated and hurried to keep up the best I could. Tyrone slinging sizzle platters under the broiler, and me ostensibly helping out, getting deeper and deeper into the weeds with every order. On the rare occasion when I could look up at the board, the dupes now looked like cuneiform or Sanskrit, indecipherable. I was losing it. Tyrone finally had to help the helper. Then grabbing a saute pan, I burned myself. I yelped out loud, dropped the pan. An order of osso buco Milanese hitting the floor, and as a small red blister raised itself on my palm, I foolishly asked the B-leaguer Tyrone if he had some burn cream and maybe a Band-Aid. This was quite enough for Tyrone. It went suddenly very quiet in the Mario kitchen, all eyes on the big broiler man and his hopelessly inept assistant. Orders, as if by some terrible and poetically just magic, stopped coming in for a long, horrible moment. Tyrone turned slowly to me, looked down, and through the bloodshot eyes, the sweat dripping off his nose, and said, "What you want, white boy? Burn cream? A Band-Aid?" Then he raised his own enormous palms to me, brought them up real close so I could see them properly. The hideous constellation of water-filled blisters, angry red welts from grill marks, the old scars of raw flesh where steam or hot fat had made the skin simply roll off. They looked like the claws of some monstrous science fiction crustacean, knobby and calloused under wounds old and new. I watched, transfixed, as Tyrone, his eyes never leaving mine, reached slowly under the broiler and, with one naked hand, picked up a glowing hot sizzle platter, moved it over to the cutting board, and set it down in front of me. He never flinched. The other cooks cheered, hooted, and roared at my utter humiliation. Orders began to come in again, and everyone went back to work, giggling occasionally, but I knew I was not going to be the Dreadnought's broiler man this year. That was for damn sure. They ended up kicking me back down to prep, one step above dishwasher on the food chain. I had been shown up for loudmouth, useless little punk that I was. I learned later, a mal carne, meaning bad meat in Italian, referred to as mal for weeks after. I had been identified as a pretender, and an obnoxious one at that. I slunk home that night in my blue Pierre Cardin suit as if it was sackcloth and ashes. I had not yet found a summer rental, so I was sleeping over the walk-in in the back room at Spiritus Pizza. My torment, my disgrace was complete. After a few days of sulking and self-pity, I slowly and with growing determination began to formulate a plan, a way to get back at my tormentors. I would go to school at the Culinary Institute of America. They were the best in the country, and certainly none of these P-Town guys had been there. I would apprentice in France. I would endure anything, evil drunk chefs, crackpot owners, low pay, terrible working conditions. I would let sadistic, bucket-headed French sous chefs work me like a Sherpa, but I would be back. I would do whatever was necessary to become as good as or better than this Mario crew. I would have hands like Tyrone's, and I would break loudmouth punks like myself over the wheel like they'd broken me. I'd show them. Okay, so he didn't quit. I think he probably just ended up, maybe he quit, but to go there. He didn't say right here he quit. He never said he quit. He never said, he just said what he ends up doing next. So yeah, that was the end of Food is Pain. That was the end of Food is Pain. All right, y'all. Peace.